What is up, fight fans? I am Jason Burgos for Sherdog.com, and this is an all-new live edition of Back Talk. This week, I have the great pleasure of having a co-host who was a 20-fight UFC veteran, two-time title contender, and a multi-time headliner for the promotion, and that man is the bully himself, Maynard. Gray, thanks for joining me today to talk a whole bunch of issues in the world of mixed martial arts.
Let's do it. I'm here. That's what I'm here for.
Now, talk to me first about the latest in your career. The most recent news in November was that you were no longer with the UFC. Also, I learned that you had never had a manager a lot of your career first. Has there been any movement finding a place for your possible next fight? And also, tell me why you chose to go so long without management. How much of that was driven by like the lack of getting big payments and just not wanting to afford to pay for a manager?
Yeah. And that was the beginning of my career. Like, obviously, I was in the UFC, the Tough Show, and they lock you into a 9-fight contract. There's no negotiating the contracts. Back then, a lot of managers would tell you that they could negotiate opponents, which I don't think that was the case. Maybe on like a special occasion you could kind of negotiate an opponent, but as far as having a manager, there was just no need. I would work with a couple people on sponsors, like Randy Couture. He was always good at kind of helping me out with a little bit of sponsors at the beginning of my career. But what was I on? 8-8, move up by 2, like each time I won, and I was at 6 or 7-0, at that time, and still on like a 14-14, 15-15, 16-16 until I fought Nate Diaz, and it was a main event, and I called Joe Silva to get my contract, like renegotiated closer. I was at like 7 fights on my 9-fight contract, and they finally did it, but only upped it to like 21-21, and I was fighting a main event, against Nate Diaz, in a number 1 contender fight. So, I just really didn't need an agent until then. And then about that time, once you're getting on main event, it's more advantageous to have an agent because of the sponsorship back then, and you could make some good money off sponsorship. You could probably make more than, I was probably making more than, I made from the UFC on sponsors. So, and by the time I got to the title fight, and, I could tell that there was really no room to move. And usually everybody's on a show win, type purse. And so, I mean, after a couple losses after the title fight, I was only making like $42,000. Up in the Bay Area, and that's hard, and I had a good manager who kind of understood it. He was just like, yeah, man, I get it, and everybody just knows the game. But I think my biggest part and everybody's biggest part right now is just helping everybody else, all the fighters, understand that we have to get the information out there, to help other people. If it just helps one guy to not get like stuck in a long contract, to renegotiate better, that's good. That's a positive. I don't want to turn this into like, telling stories just to tell stories. It's about the information. It's about getting it out there. It's about helping the guys who are locked in contracts. It's about helping the guys coming up, that need to understand, like I still hear people say like, "Oh, we got a great relationship with the UFC. The UFC loves me." There's nothing farther from the truth, right? It's purely based on money, and you have to get as much money as you can out of this game while you can, you know.
And speaking of that, in an interview you did with the Body Lock, you talk about how you were only guaranteed, I think, 26,000 for your second fight with Frankie, which
My
is
first,
just the first one.
yeah, my second with Edgar, my first title fight.
Okay, so
Yeah,
which it's still nuts. For
yeah,
title
right.
fight,
Yeah,
headliner,
yeah,
you hear so many times about undisclosed payouts and the UFC handing
right.
out random checks after events, aside from the performance bonuses, and with Dana White claiming he's making millionaires all the time. How much did you ever see of stuff like that? And did you ever get some of that undisclosed extra money when you were there?
Yeah, you get the undisclosed extra money because, um, if you don't get that, like, it's almost robbery, right? It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
basically 26 and 26. They have to do that just to keep people like afloat. Like I couldn't like I would have lost my mind if I didn't get an undisclosed. And
What were the
and
amounts
for
like? Was like five
so
thousand, 10,000?
no. So if it's a title fight, they gave us 100 grand.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's 100 grand. It's that point, but like it all depends on who it is and where you're at in your contract. So it was 100 grand is pretty standard bonus if you because what they do is they don't want to be guaranteed. They don't want to have to guarantee you money, right? They don't want to
Yeah.
have to guarantee you that 100 grand every time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's an undisclosed bonus that keeps you a little bit happy, like, oh, at least I can get by, for however long. And, everybody, talks about, that's a big chunk of change. And, well, there's a lot of money coming in off that. I was
Yeah.
pay-per-view main event, and so like it usually worked if you're fighting for a title pay-per-view main event. I'm sure, I'm not positive, but that's kind of a standard like bonus, and it can go way beyond that for people, and but everything else, it might be 20 grand, it might be 30 grand, it might be, but their whole idea of that is they don't get locked into a contract like we get
Yeah.
locked in. They lock us low and keep us happy just to keep us signing the contracts, but they never get locked in.
Do you
They
think
can
that
cut
keeps
us when they want.
do you think that kind of keeps control? Like it's a control factor and it keeps fighters
It's
from mouthing off
100%.
and they're scared, like, oh,
Yes.
let me be nice, I want to get
So I
that
can
bonus. I
get
need
the
the money.
bonus.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
that's kind of what I was, hinting at. Obviously it was a joke, but we're kind of treated like strippers. We get
Yeah.
tipped out.
Yeah, I saw that.
We're
Yeah.
not guaranteed money, and this shouldn't be a tip game. This shouldn't be a bonus game. There should be guaranteed money. You should walk to the cage and know what you're making, right? And I really don't believe in win and show because either way, they're getting that fight and they have it, forever, and they can replay it and whatever. I shouldn't have to go home after a loss, beat up and cut up, gave them a fight, and have half my paycheck. Okay, if I'm selling cars and I don't make my quota, yeah, that's half my paycheck. But I'm also, you know, they have all the they have all the access. They still got the fight. We still got the damage. Everything happened the way that it should have happened, and we should get paid for that. Guaranteed money.
During the peak period of fear during this whole pandemic, a lot of MMA media and even fans were not necessarily for the UFC doing events. However, a lot of managers were for it. The obvious thought would be, yeah, they're trying to get their fighters working, which I have no doubt is a part of the main reason, which is honorable. But if their fighters don't work, they don't get paid either. And it
Right.
seems like some managers have too friendly a relationship with the UFC, and some promotions, just some, not all. I've met some
Yeah.
really good guys that are managers. On some
Yeah.
level, do you feel like some powerful managers are just as culpable in fighter pay rates being as low as they are, and even a lack of a union?
You know, e- Everybody wants to make money. Everybody has to make money. You have to make money to put food on the table, right? And if you look at the stock market, at if you look at real estate, if you look at any big business, anything, mortgages, whatever it is, there's rules and regulations because of that. Because people try to take advantage of people and the system.
Yeah.
You know, if they can. If there's not rules, if there's not consequences, then it's a free for all. And I feel like that's what's going on right now. It's the wild wild west still, and I thought it was going to change a long time ago, and there really isn't too much of a change, and I could have just kept sliding off, just doing my own thing, but there's some big names speaking up now, and I know how hard it is, and I coach guys that they pay money to have a fight in the UFC. Like there's some guys on the prelim that it costs them more to train and more to do all that stuff than they get paid.
Yeah.
Right? And so all of that stuff sparked my it's always sparked my interest, but it just got me ticked off. Like, we should be evolving. We should have, more rules. We don't have any rules protecting us on fighter pay, on, it has to, to be disclosed how much we earn contractually, but they already found a loophole around that, right?
Yeah.
With bonuses. There's no percentage of what we need to make. There's no contractual rules. Boxing has contractual rules, and boxing has rules that protect, guys contractually.
Yeah.
And, we hear Dana talking about like, oh, boxing is broken. And I don't believe that's the case because, yeah, we might not get a couple fights that we really want, but that's because the fighters didn't get what they wanted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The fighters didn't get what they wanted, and you can't make people fight, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that fights is a fighter, and we'll fight for what we need to do, right? Nobody's scared to fight anybody. Oh, he's scared to fight him. He said, no, we're fighters. Like, that's what we do. But we want to get compensated, and that's what's happening in boxing is like there's been a couple of fights where we didn't get to see, but that's because they couldn't come to terms, right? People want to get compensated. People want to walk away from a sport knowing that they have what they need and got paid what they needed, right? We can't make people fight.
And I'm glad you brought up boxing and stuff like that. That was going to be my last question, but I'll go to it now instead. Why has it been so hard to form a union? Is it because the UFC leaves fighters desperate for pay because they go on fight to fight, like we talked a little bit about, and it makes it hard to organize? Has the UFC marketed so well, maybe you could say propagandized in a way, that just fighters, so many of them, especially young ones coming up, subconsciously think, oh, the only meaningful place is the UFC. That's the only place, and not thinking about, look, I got to make money. I know you and John Fitch, both are pro Ali Act. Is that what needs to happen? Federal government needs to step in, state commission needs to step in and kind of implement. Like, what do you think it is? What can change this? What can fix this?
Yes. So, like right now, it's heavily stacked in the promoters' favor. Heavily stacked. almost all the chips are in the promoter's favor.
Yeah.
And so, I really feel like a union is hard to start like right off the bat because we have a bunch of people that will take fights. We're looking at it with the pandemic, and guys will just jump on a card, just to put food on the table. And I understand that. I don't disagree with that, and I feel like the UFC isn't doing that because they want to keep these guys working. It's more because of ESPN contracts and quotas and a lot of different stuff. And but as far as the Ali Act, I think it'll help up the pay as well, just because a guy's not going to be locked in a contract.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So a John Jones, George, like Masvidal, Henry Cejudo, they can go negotiate with other promotions right now if they want it. Right now they can't. They're locked into the contract. And if that happens, then the pay is going to up and up and up. Right now, the UFC, their model is keeping it at 18%, 15 to 18%. That's the model. They're not going to change that. They don't want to change that. They're making money. They're paying dividends. It's news all over that they're paying dividends to actors, actresses, NFL players who are all protected by unions, who made their money because of unions. And, they're investing in the UFC because we don't have rules. The UFC was bought. Yep. UFC was bought for a large amount of money. And I think a large part of that was because they know there's no rules. When you make the rules, you make the game. You make everything that you want, and and that's kind of why, Dana kind of he puts it in our head that boxing is broken. Boxing is broken. Well, boxing is a little bit more favored in a boxer's sense because if you're good, you can ask for the money.
Yeah.
And you can, and you're not locked into contracts.
Now there are a great set of tweets, and I'm going to ask this too because somebody put in the chat hashtag Joe Silva stories from you, Mike Pierce, John Fitch, Matt Pena about how douchey Joe Silva can be to work with, and you all gave various stories and how you dealt with him and stuff like that. Talk to me about why he was a nightmare to deal with, and do you have 2 or 3 examples, be it from you or just teammates dealing with him?
Yeah, and that was, that hashtag is cool, and it gets a little bit of the stories out there and gets a little bit of people talking, but I don't want to have it I don't want it to take away from the fact of Joe Silva made his money. He's gone. He cashed out and he was out of there, and his business tactics were bullyish, and his business tactics, were not right. I don't think he's a good person as far as the way he's treated a lot of the guys, Is it cool to hear the stories and get that stuff out there? Yeah. But I don't want it to take away from what we're trying to do, and that's trying to help guys and girls to understand, like, what's going on with the sport, right? And, there's a ton of stories out there, and, it would be kind of nice to let the fans know, to let fighters know, like, how it worked. But again, he's in the past. He made probably $10 million off that payout. That's what I'm hearing, and he's gone. But that's still, nothing's changed. We got to concentrate on getting the Ali Act passed. We got to concentrate on helping fighters to understand, like, you're not in good with the UFC. Nobody is, unless you have a new market to help them with. Khabib, he's Russia. Connor is Ireland. And a lot of the world, but GSP, he was Canada. Bisbing, he was England. Unless you have that, they're not playing games. And fighters need to understand that.
And we're not out to necessarily slander him, but
Right.
I think it's maybe relevant still, and to just give me one or two, just because, he's not there, but chances are the system worked, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're still continuing the same kind of ideas. It worked like gangbusters
Right.
for whatever he did to Bully. So,
Right.
what are some of the things they did to bully people into contracts and make them stay? I'm sure that, like I said, they're still probably doing it now.
Yeah. Just with injuries, like, it was always a pain in the ass to tell him, like, hey, dude, I got to pull out of a fight. Joe Silva would be pissed off if you pulled out too early, if you pulled out too late. It just, there was never, he was the guy on the sideline that could pick your career apart, pick your competition apart, to where that's why he's gonna lowball you, and that's why he's gonna stick to that low ball, and that's why we need standards, and that's why we need people to be able to leave that contract and not have them stuck in a contract knowing, like, hey, if I turn the fight down, they're just going to extend my contract even more, right? And
Talk to me about that, because I heard Josh Gross mention that, like, if John Jones wanted to leave or wait out his contract, he really couldn't. They could add on years or whatever. I didn't know about that. Well, how does that work? Like, if you turn down 1 or 2 fights and your contract has the year term is ended, they could say, look, you didn't take these 2 fights and you were supposed to have 6 fights in 3 years, kind of thing.
So the way that I understand it is, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I know how it works, because you get the letters in the mail.
Oh yeah.
If you turn down a fight, they're contractually obligated to give you like a fight in a certain amount of period of time, right? Now, whether it's like, hey, we want you to go against this guy on this date, it could be short notice, it could be whatever. There's no there's really nothing in the contracts, I think, that gives them the right to offer a fight in a certain amount of time, like give you 8 weeks to prepare, blah blah blah.
Right.
So if you turn down the fight, they take it as you're injured. Now, again, don't quote me on this, but they'll extend your contract with time on the back end because of that. Because they offered you the fight, but you turned it down, right? You can't take that fight. So that's where the extension comes into play.
And I can totally believe it, too, because WWE, I've read things. WWE does the same thing. If people get injured, they extend their contracts as well.
Yes, that's exactly what it's like. And like for us, I'm pretty sure it's essentially, if you turn down that fight, you're basically injured. Wow. They offered the fight, and you didn't take it. Now we extend your contract.
Wow. All right. So, I mean, that's pretty much most of the question I have for you. Now we can jump into questions from the Sherdog forums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, the first one is from, this is a tough name to say, Seryoku Zenyo, and they ask, why did Jessica I's coach text Calvillo's people about the weight miss by 3.5 pounds before her weigh-in? Did Jessica I cheat and grab the towel? Also, there's a follow-up. Have we all forgotten about Daniel Jones's controversial weigh-in at 210? And I thought you were perfect to answer this, because you've been in you were doing folk wrestling long before you got into MMA. You're a high level collegiate wrestler, so I'm sure you've been dealing with weight cutting and all the tricks and seen the tricks for years.
Yeah.
One, do you know what are some of the things you've seen in terms of the towel hole that people allege and all these kinds of things throughout
Yeah.
your career and both, and also, do you think her I's coaches texting Calvia's coaches, was that just like out of respect thing? Have you ever seen anything like that? A coach text another coach like, "Look, my fighter's not going to make weight."
Yeah. Yeah. So I wasn't in Jessica's eyes corner, but that's probably out of kind of respect to where it's like maybe checking where they're at. Hey, you're gonna take this. You're gonna still take this if if we come in overweight. Just a little bit of communication. And not a respect, I guess, as well. Just checking, because you don't want her killing herself, even more, because there's been some serious problems with weight cutting. People get their kidneys messed up, go to the hospital, whatever it is. So, like, obviously, they probably wanted to check if they were going to take the fight or if they had to make it, because you never know. If you step on that scale overweight, you're kind of leaving it out there for people to kind of make the choice on their own. Like, I don't want to take this fight.
And what have you seen in have you seen, you have interesting stories of people, not saying Jessica did it, that's an allegation from Kavia, but it just, in your career, like, interesting ways to beat weight cuts by holding on the towels or holding on to anything?
Yeah. I mean, you're at a very vulnerable state. Like when you're cutting weight and you just want it to be over. And, if you're having a terrible weight cut and you can cheat, you'll do it. It's like, I mean, that's like a person starving. Like, hey, did you steal that piece of bread? Yes, I did. I was starving. I was almost dying, so, but that's part of our job. I understand that. That's part of our job, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you're in a vulnerable spot. You're dehydrated. You're hungry, and and people will do anything that they possibly can to cheat in weigh-ins. And yes, I saw people doing that growing up that had tough weight cuts, that couldn't make weight, and there's a lot of different tricks. And I guess I'm not on the rules board yet, so I'm going to keep those tricks a little separate and not try to screw all the guys and girls who still are trying the tricks, I guess.
No, fair enough. Now, this next question comes from Shadows. They ask, every single fight, UFC announcers, and I thought this is, again, perfect for you, always talk like taking someone down turns the fight towards the guy on top. Can anyone explain why exactly a takedown should count so much? No one you can say, made more and won more by using takedowns than Gray Maynard. I felt you were a perfect person to answer this. What do you think that is? Why are takedowns scored so highly, and why do they really sway rounds in the judge's opinion?
Well, first of all, I do know the UFC PI was doing a little bit of research about, like, if you score a takedown, if a person scored a takedown in round one or scored one takedown in each round, they were there was like 80% chance of winning, or statistically there was 80%, about that. I could be wrong on the numbers. Again, I'm not, I'm not the guy doing that. But the UFC PI was doing that. But anyways, I think a takedown means more because you're controlling where the fight goes. Right? Now you're controlling where the fight goes. And being a wrestler, if it's pretty even in the stand-up, if you score a takedown, that should lock out the round. That should lock the round up, because you're talking about an even, stand-up war, and it's not like we're counting punches, like each round, to where it's like, oh, he had 80 punches to 73 punches, he or she, if it looks about even to a person, a takedown's definitely going to score a lot more points to win you that round. And then also, it's just dictating you just dictated where it needs to go, where you want it to be, right? It's like, if I control a guy in the octagon and, I have him backing up the whole fight, and I'm cornering him and he's just trying to get out, and we're still pretty even punch count, that'll probably play into a judge's, eyes and mind, that he won that round, because I controlled where it went.
I get two follow-ups. Like, one, because again, you've taken down stars at the highest level and you made your name on it. Would you say, for people that don't understand this level of fighting, the work that goes into technique, the skill, that it would be a universally accepted idea, a takedown is an extremely hard thing to get at this level, so it's completely deserving of high scoring?
A takedown is the hardest physically exerting and challenging aspect of the game. Yeah, we have technical striking but you can still relax. Boxing rounds are 3 minutes, 12 rounds, right? That's a lot of time. That's almost, that's like 36 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right or wrong? I'm terrible at math.
No, you're good.
36 minutes.
Yeah.
We don't have 36-minute wrestling matches. We have, 3 minute, 2 minute, 2 minute in college. In Olympics, it's even, it could be even less, but, it's a grueling sport. And if you go to any gym across the world, it's, like wrestling day is a day to where people are like, my elbow hurts, I'm gonna skip today, because it's rough, and great example. When Conor fought Chad Mendes, do you remember that?
Yep.
Here's an example of Chad stepped in on pretty short notice. He was in New Zealand hunting, and he fought Conor McGregor. Now, Chad Mendes isn't going to outstrike Conor McGregor, right? But with the amount of time, I knew in my mind, this isn't going to play good for Chad Mendes, because if you have a wrestling game plan of going 25 minutes of wrestling a person, you need a full camp. You need conditioning. You need a gas tank that is through the roof, because that's a very grueling fight if you're taking people down the whole time. Boxing and kicking and striking, it's still taxing, but not as taxing as taking a person, standing to the mat. You use every muscle in your body, and it does create a lot of exertion, to do that.
Now, that second follow-up to end the wrestling conversation, because I did an article years ago about how defense maybe is in the rule book, but it's not scored enough. What are your thoughts on defensive wrestling? Should that maybe, because there'll be a lot of times that the one I always remember is Aldo versus Florian, where Florian did a lot of holding Aldo against the cage. He really didn't do much, didn't get takedowns, but he was winning rounds until eventually he got stopped. Do you think stopping a guy, doing all that work to stop a takedown and defending it, and should that maybe even get scored high too? Because if you're going to score the takedown high, shouldn't you score high the defense of it?
Okay, so here's my rebuttal on that. With holding a person on a cage, it's still grueling, and you're still controlling where the fight needs to be, right? You're controlling that, right? Whether it's I'm controlling the striking, I'm controlling the takedown where it needs to be. If I'm holding him up against a cage, that still takes effort, that still takes strategy, and that still takes a lot of technique and skill. So that's important. Now, if we start scoring, he stopped a takedown, then do we start scoring? He stopped a triangle. He stopped an armbar. Like defense is defense. Do I score? I blocked a punch. So we're talking about offense. We're talking about now. I could see where we score a person getting up, because he just took the game plan, or he just decided and acted on changing the fight, which is standing up, right? So defensively, that's kind of like trying to score. Well, he stayed out of that sub, but just like in wrestling, if you stand up, if you get away from a person, that's a point. It's not high points, but it's still a point. So if you get taken down and you stand up and you change where that fight is at because you worked to do that, then maybe we should start to award a little bit of credit to that guy.
Now, this is a question from the chat. MMA Random, they ask, going back to our weight cutting conversation, how was it cutting weight when you were on Tough 5? Because that's an interesting, you got these fights in a short amount of time. Like, how was that process? Was that, because we talked about weight cutting being so terrible, was that one of the most terrible times?
Yeah, that was a pretty bad time just because you didn't know when you made weight. And that TV show is a reality TV show, which means it's anything but reality. Right. So, we're all stuck in a house and we can fight at any moment and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, you had to kind of keep your weight down just in case you were called up, and you didn't have a lot of time to do that, or you had a lot of time, but you didn't have a lot of time to balloon up because that next week or day or whatever it was, you had to be close enough to make weight.
Now, this next question comes from the White Rooster. They ask, what's the reason the UFC doesn't disclose a fighter's total purse each fight, which we kind of talked about. Would you say they don't disclose because, again, it's a control thing, or is it more for them? They don't want to expose their practices to the world on how they control.
Well, they also don't want to disclose what a guy's getting paid. So if I got a bonus check, right, for $100,000 for the title fight, and Frankie got 300, and I knew that happened, then I would probably pipe up like, why didn't I at least get 200? And then also it's to keep, because you have to report the contractual amount you're getting paid to the like you have to report that to where
to
they can put that public. You can make that public. So what they do is they're trying to keep those low to where people can look at that, and know like, oh, he's only getting that, but you don't know about the bonuses. And as long as you can keep what people can see low, that's all the information that they have, and for a long time, like, fighters would keep it quiet because your bonuses, because you feel like you deserve that, or we were kind of working against each other, and or even if you put it out, you might feel like the UFC would get mad at you because you are
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
it out there, and you think that they're doing you good, but really they're just trying to keep the sport from going to the next level of pay.
Now another
It's
question
very,
from the
very,
chat.
very smart business.
Yeah.
They're is it fair? I don't believe so.
Yeah. I mean, Pat Mack in the chat, they asked, who does Gray like in the Habib Gaethje matchup coming up?
Yeah. I liked Tony in the Gaethje matchup, but
Yeah, I did too.
he looked unbelievable, man. He's
Yeah.
got great coaching. He's got confidence. And it's always hard. And again, I like both those guys. Great guys, and I want to see them both make money and you know live a happy life. Just because they're fighters, and I love everybody that does go in there. Now you look at Tony's like lead up to that fight. You had people dropping out. You had the guy in consistent training camp. He even made weight. I don't know why he did that, but he even made weight that one
Yep.
time. And
Yep.
and it's hard to keep a high level of training like for a very long period of time. It's taxing on your body. The human anatomy, the human body can only take so much punishment, and that's what training camp is. It's a lot of punishment, and if you don't do it right and don't allow your body to recover, your performance will pay. So that being said, Khabib is one of the best ever. He is he's put his game together very well, and he knows what he does, and people know what he does, what his game plan is, right? So Gaethje has smart coaches, and they might like make a couple adjustments, and that's a great part about competing is you make adjustments, small adjustments geared towards the opponent you have, especially if you have the time to do that. So if I had to bet, I'd probably take Khabib, just because he's on a roll, and but you can never count Gaethje out now, and he looked phenomenal. He really did. Again, this is just me as an outside of the cage, not in his camp. All right, did Gaethje look great, or did Tony just not look good? Right? Was his body too overwhelmed and slow because of all the training and because of the dropouts and because of all that, but again, hats off to Gaethje. He is a beast, and hopefully he gets paid well for the Khabib, and he goes out there prepared, and hopefully Khabib goes out there prepared, and then you see who the best is.
All right, this question comes from The Greatest, and they ask, which I actually like this question, this is a fascinating question. They ask, how do you rank the main three WEC lightweights of Benson, Henderson, Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis all time? Because what's interesting, you didn't get to face them when the transition happened, which is crazy because you fought so many guys. For me, I would probably have Benson first, because the competition level, yes, he lost to Anthony, but his competition level, he beat Donald twice.
Yeah.
And then I put Pettis and then Cerrone, just because Cerrone could not get over that championship hump. How would you rank those three?
Yeah, that's exactly how I would do it. Benson is the most consistent. Pettis is like next on consistency, and then you got Donald. Yeah. Donald can look great on one fight, and then he can look terrible on the other fight, but he's repped out numbers. I mean, he's like the Cal Ripken, right? The guy, and he just reps them out, and he's a legend that aspect, but I feel like that didn't give him enough opportunity to, to be the best for every competition he did, right? It was kind of more just, let's rep it out. Let's rep it out. I feel confident for this fight. I'm going to jump in, and he'll beat him. Let's rep it out. Let's keep going. Let's keep, I don't feel confident, but still I'm going to take the fight, whether my training is lacking, whether I need money, whatever it is, you got to be able to take a fight because you feel confident. And I feel like a lot of the fights he lost, he just didn't have the confidence. It was more of a mental deal. I think, I think Benson and Donald are the most well-rounded. Pettis is a phenomenal striker. He does have a really good game on the ground, but I feel like Donald, has a great great ground game. He's got great striking. Just well-rounded. Like striking wise, Anthony Pettis is probably the best out of all of them. Well-rounded. Benson Henderson, he's got everything. He's got wrestling. He's got jiu-jitsu, he's got striking, he's got movement, but I would agree with that order, of being the best.
What were you disappointed that you didn't get to face any? Were any possible fights? Was any of those three ever close at one point during your career in UFC?
So Anthony Pettis was the closest.
Okay.
And when me and Edgar had that draw, Anthony Pettis just came off that jump off the cage to, a spin kick. They had just bought WEC, so we were merging. They said that Anthony Pettis gets the title shot of whoever wins. So I remember Dana couldn't be at the, at the pay-per-view, and Joe Silva absolutely just loved that Anthony Pettis kick. I remember him talking to us before the fight, like, you got to go out there, do what Anthony Pettis did. He, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then, and then me and, Edgar, we had that pretty good fight. It's probably one of the best championship, bouts like in history. And, I remember Dana was out. He couldn't do the press conference, and Joe Silva, he said that I didn't get the title shot. Next, Anthony Pettis is getting it, and Dana changed it around. He called me on the phone after the press. He's like, you're getting the title fight, because it's hard to move on from a draw. Right, especially a great fight like that, So it was pretty obvious to me. But then contractually, Joe Silva called my agent, and he kept putting it out there I don't feel like Grace, he should be getting the title fight, and blah blah blah, and that's when we were renegotiating a contract. Fast forward, we had a fight scheduled in May between me and Edgar. Edgar pulled out 2 weeks before, and his back was hurt. And you know what? They offered Anthony, but I was kind of dealing with a bunch of injuries as well, because I couldn't pull out as a challenger. I could never pull out as a challenger, because if you do pull out, they're going to put, another person in there, and then just keep moving on from there. So, I stepped out. I was like, I'm going to get my elbow scope, and I did. They scrapped that fight and moved it to August. Again, dealt with a couple more injuries, had to get an epidural 3 weeks before. it was
Wow.
like an epidural kind of nerve block. My back was thrown out, and
Wow.
but just knew that I had to take the fight because, that's another thing. They control the rankings. They control the number one contenders. They
Yep.
control everything. Yes, you control it to an extent, but if you look at the streak that I did, I like after the TV show, Emerson was a no contest.
Mm.
Um, I've I fought Joe Ferris with the quickest knockout, one of
Mm.
the quickest. It was 9 seconds. Then I had Dennis Seaver, Frankie Edgar, Rich Clemente, um, uh, Roger Huerta,
Mm.
Nate Diaz, Kenny Florian. That was 8 fights in a row,
Wow.
9 fights without a loss. And they already gave the championship to Edgar before me,
Mm.
So even though I beat Edgar,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just they control it, So I had to, it was appealing to go up against a striker and to go up against him when he had that big name, but you can't pass up a belt and you can't put that like in jeopardy.
Now,
But
last question. Yeah, no, keep going. Keep going.
yeah, but didn't really have a chance to fight Benson and Donald Cerrone. Never had a chance either.
Now, last question. If you had your options, I'm sure money is the main preference for return, and whoever offers the best is going to get your services. But is there any preference? Is there a preference for Bellator? Does PFL interest you because you fight your way to it? You control your destiny far more in PFL. Is one championship Horizon interesting because you will love to fight in Asia? Any of them have a
Yeah.
preference, or it's really who offers the best?
Yeah. So what got me into the sport was Pride. I really liked Pride. I just loved the show. I loved, what they were doing. It was really an entertaining, um, it was entertaining promotion. I
Yeah,
loved it. There was a
yeah,
lot of great guys,
yeah,
and a lot of people never watched a live Pride,
yeah.
and it was amazing. And, you know, it would be cool to go into Japan and like fight for a Japanese company. Um, PFL, I love what they're doing. I really do. I think that is the coolest platform because, if you win, you keep moving ahead, you know,
Exactly.
and that's appealing as well. Um, Bellator is just what you see is what you get,
Yeah.
like guys are getting paid. Guys are making guaranteed money. I think there was like an article to where they pay their guys uh,
Yeah.
50%,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to support a company like that as well. Um, it just what's best for me and what's best for um, uh, just kind of my future.
All right. So on and last note, is there anything you like to promote projects coming up, social media? You already have a ton of followers on
Yeah.
Twitter, but let people know about your social. Any sponsors, anything you want to plug?
Yeah. No, great Maynard. And the only thing I want to plug is we got to keep talking about this stuff. We got to keep talking about the guys' pay. We got to keep talking and getting the numbers out there, getting the stories out there, but mainly getting the numbers out there, getting John Jones and George are doing a great job, and they're standing up, for what guys need to be, like for our rights.
Yeah.
And hopefully they continue to do that, and I will support them 100%, 100%, 100%, just because I know what it is to get into that cage and feel like you have to do it.
Yeah.
right? Because of bills, because of whatever it is, and contractually, you have to take this, fight,
Yeah.
and it really takes the sport out of MMA. It's really not a sport then. It's bullying people to do this stuff, and that's what I want to get out there, and that's what I want people to keep talking about.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a couple stories and the Joe Silva stories, and that's great, but really we got to keep to you know the main point of what we're trying to do and what our goal is.
All right, now for me, you can always follow me, Cheap Seats Chat, on Twitter and Instagram. Gray Maynard, an absolute pleasure again to talk to you. Thank you so much again for the time today.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
All right, I'm stopping the stream now.